Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try and get started right on time. I think it's just at 6 o'clock now. A very big welcome to all of you to the 21st, can you believe it, Dolphin Coast Residents and Ratepayers Association AGM. I'm delighted to see, and how awkward is it that we have to do the social distancing, but delighted to see so many people here. So a very big welcome. We also have about 10 people on Zoom that has joined us, and this is our first attempt at doing a Zoom meeting. So we are constantly falling over cables, but hopefully we can manage. So we've got people on Zoom as well. They won't be able to talk, or we won't see them, but they are in the chat room and they can chat, and Flip is monitoring the chat room. So any questions or any comments or any voting is going to happen via that. I trust you've all registered. Thank you. Cell phones on silent will be much appreciated. And then quickly to introduce my committee, I need to just give 3 apologies, all 3 COVID related, of our committee. Don Forbes is still under quarantine until the 25th. Mary is very vulnerable to COVID at the moment with her health condition, so she can't be here. And Vanessa has got to go and do a film shoot and had to sign a contract that she will isolate herself prior to going to do the film shoot. So those are the 3 apologies.
Those are other people's apologies.
And if I can just read out other apologies. So I've got Don, Mary, Vanessa, Alan from Sheffield Beach Estate, Tommy de Toy, our councillor, Dave Coates, Leon Erasmus from Port Zimbali, Rob Westhuizen, also Sheffield Beach Estate, Brian and Margaret Jackson, Tammy, but she is here. So Tammy, good to see you, and Dale Stokovic. Those are the apologies. We will record them like that for the minutes. Thank you. So of my committee, Steph, if I can give that to you, because there's very little space here. Of our committee, I'd like to just introduce our committee very quickly. We've got Hans Bruce sitting right in front here. Next to him, our previous chairman, Ken Lever. Next to him, Dion Buerta Richards. Just behind him, Brian. Good to have you. Over to the left is Penny. I think Gabby is still on the outside, busy registering some people. And then our vice chair, Flip, on the far end. He couldn't move further away, but he needs quite a view for the camera to watch all of you as well. And Stephanie, our executive director, that is here in front of me. A very big welcome, a very big thank you to Zimbiti. Welcome. You guys are always there for us, so we really appreciate that, making the venue available. I know you may have to duck early, so I'm putting your thank you up early so that you're here, but a special thanks to Zimbiti for always hosting us. We've got a fairly full agenda. If I can find how to scroll this presentation. Steph, how do I do that? How do I move to the next slide? Where's page down? Shift and page down.
Did you do it? No. I think it's there. Can't see.
Careful of the cable here. While they're going to sort that out.
On the presentation, and that should take you to the place.
Ah, you see. So we've got a very full agenda. The first part of the agenda I'm going to rush through fairly quickly because that's the boring stuff. And then we've got 2 sets of guest speakers. We've got Warwick Chapman from GBOC, who's going to have a chat with us, and we'll have some time for some questions as well. And then after that, we've got Caesar Water. I think the MD is going to be here, and the CFO. So Caesar Water at the moment, as you may know, is a very hot topic. So we've got them here. And then we would like to share what's been happening this year, not last year. So there's been a lot of activity, property revaluations and the complexity around that, and quite a few other things. So I'd like to get to those last bits fairly early so that we don't finish off too late. So the next item, spacebar, there we go. It's been done. To go back, we do have a quorum, so we've just checked, and with the one state representative on Zoom, we have a quorum, which is 10% of our membership, which is 360. So we're comfortable with that. Then the approval of the minutes. The minutes were handed out now, but they were circulated. They've been on the website. We've gone through them a couple of times. I'm going to take them as read, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions or any amendments to the minutes. And if they're not, can I take it as approved? The minutes are approved of our last AGM. Thank you very much. We move on to the chairman's report. It's fairly comprehensive. We spent quite a bit of time preparing it, and we would maybe want to highlight one or two things out of the chairman's report before we accept it. Firstly, it was a COVID year. So it was a whole new experience for everybody, including ourselves. And we had to become digitally wise. We had a Zoom account opened. We upgraded our website. We opened lots of social media accounts, and we started communicating in that way. The other difficulty was communicating with the municipality, because it took them a few months longer to get online and to get connected and to start having meetings with them. So it was a very challenging year from that point of view. When we get to finances, you see it was actually a good year for us, good membership income and so on. So we're quite solid. I think also just to mention, I've mentioned our committee, but just to highlight the fact that we have various subcommittees. We've got a road subcommittee. We've got a finance subcommittee. We've now got a water subcommittee. We've got a communication subcommittee. We've got a digital media subcommittee. So, and then we've got a Dolphin Coast Outreach Subcommittee, which is our charity arm that started during the last year. We're very pleased and proud with it. We're currently feeding 10,000 meals a month, soup meals. It's a virtual soup kitchen. What I mean by that is we've got about 60 volunteers cooking soup at home. We collect it, it's frozen, and we distribute it, augmenting charities across the highway on the other side, from Fraser's in the south to Tembeni in the north, and we're very pleased with that initiative that is ongoing. So that was something new during the year as well. We also have special purpose committees. So Townsend Park, which has been a problem, has got a dedicated committee looking after that challenge and monitoring anything that happens there. In Sheffield Beach, with the roads and the big challenge that they had there, we've engaged with a local organized informal committee there to see how we can assist with negotiations. I can't mention the restaurant's name, but there is a restaurant that is playing silly buggers as far as hours and trading is concerned, making lots of noise, and we involved with the community locally. So there are various sub areas that have a dedicated problem that we're involved with. And then I'm very pleased to say that our, let me call it our advisory committee. So those are people that don't serve on our committee, but have made their time available and their expertise available to us when and if we need that. And we've got quite a number of people there. So we've got Alan Walls, who I know is here. We've got you, Hodge. Both of them are engineers, and whenever we need to ask them their input, they're there. We've got Rob McIntosh, a CA, that on the finance side that we can help. He helped us particularly, helped Brian, that chairs that committee, to prepare 50 odd questions for MPAC, which totally threw them when we arrived there. So we've got Malcolm Kenset, and soon Ken Lever, who's saying that he's stepping down from our committee, but he's prepared to carry on with the various initiatives that he has as well. So over and above main committee, various subcommittees, various regional committees on regional issues, and then people that we can tap into. Any of you feel to join that, if you've got a certain area of expertise, we're looking for some legal brains, would really help us as well. We can always do with some more accountants and engineers, but any area of expertise. If you don't want to necessarily serve on a committee or a subcommittee, but if we can tap into your resources from time to time, please reach out to me or to Flip or to Stephanie, and we'd like to put your names on there. This is a very sensitive connection. Tell me when it gets back on. Okay. Then we go to our finances, and immediately let me take the word audited away. Before my audit committee member, they're not audited, they are compiled. Is that the right word? Reviewed, compiled and reviewed. So we have our finances, which we've distributed. I've said to you that we've had a fairly good year. We had about a 40% increase in revenue. Last year, we didn't have a massive membership growth, a bit of a membership growth, but we had a profitable year as compared to the year before, where we had to do quite a number of write-offs to clean our balance sheet. So our total income last year was 331,000 Rand. Our total expenditure was 236, and our surplus 95,000. And that has now gone to our reserve account, and that's bolstered our reserve account to 350,000 Rand. So we've got a kitty of 350,000 Rand, or more or less 1 year's income, which we think is prudent. We need a bit stronger kitty if we are going to go legal with the municipality, which we'll touch on later. But so we're going to keep on trying to make some surpluses to bolster that. Do we have any questions on our finances? They've been circulated, they've been checked. Our auditor on the committee has gone through them. Dion is here, we can answer any questions. They're really very simple. Our balance sheet is cleaned out, so we don't have any issues there. If not, can I ask for approval? Anybody voting against the acceptance of our reviewed finances? Thank you very much. That motion's carried. Our budget overview for the next year. Dion works hard at keeping us balanced, and we're budgeting an income of 400,000 Rand for this year. Our expenditure, we're budgeting at 338,000, and we should end up with a surplus at 61,000. As it's going at the moment, we're ahead of the game. We're a good stretch into the year already, probably a third or just a bit more than a third, and we're ahead of our budget. All expenses are pretty well managed. So thank you for everybody's support, and especially the estate's support. That helps us. Do we have any questions on our budget for the year going forward? We don't? Yes, sir.
I think we really need to encourage a lot more residents who are outside of the estates to join DOCRRA. I think we're a bit thin on the ground, quite frank. I think we have to make it clear that we represent the entire community, and I think we need to, in this coming year, encourage more, I don't quite know how you define them, but non-estate residents.
Single residents, yeah.
We're a little bit lopsided with estate members as opposed to whatever, suburban members.
You're totally right, Ken, and we're very keen to increase that. We are pleased that we've doubled from last year to this year. So we're currently sitting just over 100 single residents as members, and they're joining at a pace, 5 to 10 a month at the moment. But we need a lot more.
Sorry, John. He's going to ask you to repeat the questions for the sake of the people on the WhatsApp. They won't hear the people there.
That's true. The question was, or the suggestion was for those people on Zoom, is that we need more single resident members, and a comment well made, and definitely one of our initiatives. Thank you, Ken. Okay, then we move on to the election of committee members. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Ken, how long have you been on the committee? Five, 6, 7, been many years. And a couple of years as chairman, a couple of years as vice chairman. And I think without Ken's counsel, we would really have struggled. So you have been a pillar of strength, and your involvement in the community is amazing. DOCRRA is only one of the initiatives that you're involved with. So on the building side, on the architectural side, on the charity side, I know that you're very involved. So we've brought a small gift to say thank you very much for your time. We're delighted that you're going to stay on in an advisory capacity. So if you'll come forward, I'd just like to give you a tot of whiskey to say thanks. I hope whiskey is...
That'd be lovely.
Before you go, You know that your social media contact is your wife, Frances. Yeah. So here's a bunch of flowers for her.
Very kind of you, thanks.
Okay, please give it to her.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Then I'm delighted that the other 9 committee members have all agreed to stay on. Gabby, good to have you with us now. Thank you. Thanks for helping us outside. So all 9 of them have agreed to stay on. And then during the year, we co-opted Brian Boertes onto our committee, who has done a sterling job on the finances, and he has agreed to stand. So we've got his nomination. So he will make up the 10th member. We can have 12 people on our committee without going to a vote. So we've got 2 more vacancies. If there are any nominations from the floor, you're most welcome. We'll just second that. And not seeing any hands going up yet. Maybe you're all considering joining our advisory. Let's call it our trial committee before you join. If there are no other nominations, then I'm delighted to confirm or ask if everybody is comfortable that the 9 people are re-elected. I'll just go through their names very quickly. It's myself, it is Flip, Dion Botha Richards, Penny Fourie, Hans Bruce, Vanessa Honeyball, Don Forbes, who couldn't be here, Mary that couldn't be here, Gabby that is here, and then Brian Boertes, who's joining us as well. If I look at the committee, what I'm really pleased about is the broad representation that we have. 2 of our committee members serve on both the neighborhood watches, Ballito and Salt Rock. Those same 2 also serve on the 2 ward committees. As I've mentioned, Ken serves on a number of committees. There is a fairly broad representation into the community and other committees, which assists. And then at the recent GBOC, which we'll be talking about just a little bit later, our Vice Chairman Flip was representing DOCRRA, and he lived there, like everybody else that were involved with GBOC, lived there for that whole week during the insurrection, if that's the right word, that we had. So we're pleased that we're fairly widespread, and we get feedback and input, and we can give feedback and input. Penny in particular, who's also been a long-standing member on our committee and a journalist, has that investigative streak about her. So she helps us a lot investigating. She's got good contacts in the municipality as well. Gabby, that joined us a year ago, very well connected in the charity space and in the community. So all of us have other outside roles that we play in the various organizations in Ballito. And I'll touch on that right at the end on my chairman's view of what I think where we're going and where our challenges lie going forward. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Flip to come and introduce our first guest speaker. We've managed to get through the business end of it fairly promptly. Committee is elected, finance is accepted, minutes approved, and our chairman's report has been accepted, so, and our budget. So we now go to Flip, who will introduce Warwick, and after that we'll do Caesar. Thanks, Flip. Okay, have we got the Caesar representatives here? Wonderful. Penny, over to you. Penny will introduce Caesar. We've prepared some questions. Penny has prepared some questions, so we'll do that next. Thanks. Come this way. And don't touch anything. Or kick it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I extended an invite to the management team of Caesar. We have our managing director, Mr. Misra, who's going to be joining us today. With him is the ops manager, Mr. Kobus Fourie, and the financial manager, Mr. Herman Botha. Welcome. Obviously, for those of you that are in the know with the media, the recent Concord case that ruled with Umgeni Waters allows Umgeni Water to impose a tariff on Caesar of 41.4%, which is obviously going to have a massive impact on our water bill. And just a little bit of background, Caesar Water had in 1999 was appointed as the water authority in our region. They were given a concession area. It was from Tongard River, which was the south, and it went all the way to Tinley Manor. That's their concession area. And they provide a water and sanitation service to our region. And they have stepped in the shoes of Ilembe District Municipality, who obviously are the water board authorities for the rest of the region. They provide a really efficient service. For those of you who are familiar with the woos that happen in Stanger and the various wards that have constant challenges, we are very lucky. So what we wanted to do is basically ask them if they are going to be possibly fighting the court's decision and taking it further on appeal, and whether that 41.4% is going to affect the ratepayers in terms of when it will be implemented, if it's going to be imposed in the new financial year, or if it's going to be taken over long term, and how we're going to obviously deal with it as ratepayers. Are we going to possibly accept a public partnership, a private partnership, which has benefited all of us, but are we as paying ratepayers, that we are the customers of the municipality, are we now being penalized for a private public partnership that was signed in 1999 and was a 30-year contract? Obviously, there's another 8 years left to Caesar's contract. So there are a few questions that we'd just like to, obviously, Caesar to address for us. Thanks, Mr. Misra. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to touch anything. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to the councillors are here as well. Councillor Tammy Colley, as well as Councillor Privy, if I'm not acknowledged any of the others. Thank you for having us. And I think the engagement we have here is not a pleasant one, obviously. So I think just to give you some background and context of what happened. So Umgeni Water's been the bulk water service provider to Caesar, as well as many municipalities in KZN, since, for our purposes, since 1999. And over that whole period, they've had a uniform tariff for all its customers. Save for eThekwini, being the largest customer, that enjoyed a slight discount compared to everybody else. And then in 2014, 2015, when the drought occurred, Umgeni basically decided to escalate the tariff of Caesar by 41%. This was somewhat surprising. And although we have a pass-through mechanism in terms of tariff, we've never implemented that, simply because we felt it was unjust and incorrect. And we took to the courts to basically overturn this. Now, in terms of the contract we have with Umgeni Water, we should have gone through an arbitration process. But Umgeni Water, in their correspondence to us, claimed that once the minister promulgated their tariff, basically it's done and dusted. So because the contract that we have does not include the minister, we couldn't go through the arbitration process. We had to go to the High Court, which we duly did. The Pietermaritzburg High Court ruled in favor of Caesar Water to overturn the tariff. Umgeni Water and the minister thereafter applied to the Supreme Court of Appeal to have the matter heard, and they were unsuccessful there as well. Following that, Umgeni Water applied to the Constitutional Court, and that case was dismissed by the Constitutional Court, stating that the chances of success were very remote, or there's no chance of success, in short. It was I think it was a two-line judgment at that stage. However, the minister filed their application late for leave to appeal, and some 6 to 8 months later, they were granted the leave to appeal. However, in between all of that, Umgeni Water signed with and drafted a settlement agreement with Caesar Water for the backdated charges, the respective interest, etc., and that was duly implemented. So when Umgeni Water got wind that the minister's leave to appeal was granted, they decided to piggyback on that application. During the proceedings, and I think it's on YouTube, the minister actually conceded that they made an error in granting Umgeni Water that tariff. So we were pretty bullish after the hearing, but Umgeni Water basically pleaded their case. And hence, when the judgment came out, I think even Umgeni Water very surprised that they actually had got the tariff. But not only did that judgment do that, it also took away the power of the minister to approve any water board's tariff. Well, what he said is the minister does not have authority to grant the tariff of a water board. So since then, unfortunately, we were represented by Advocate Kem J. Kemp, who subsequently died late last year. And we obviously didn't have our senior counsel to consult. So our attorneys sought to consult with another very, very senior advocate. I think we've been asked not to give his name at present, but he was involved in also drafting the Constitution of South Africa. So we went, pretty heavy-handed because we wanted to challenge it. The advice from both the senior counsel and junior counsel is the chances of rescinding this judgment is almost remote to none. It will be wasted exercise to actually apply to the ConCourt, because the only other precedent we have for someone asking to rescind a judgment of the ConCourt, we've been told, is the former President Jacob Zuma, which that case is still pending. So there's no precedent in terms of us looking to rescind this judgment. So I think, just to give you some background and context of where we are, and I'll read out some of the questions that I did receive from Penny and provide some brief answers, and thereafter we can take further questions on the matter. So the question was basically, is our understanding that as a water service provider for the concession area and North Coast, CESA Water takes on the same function as Ilembe. However, based on Umgeni's argument that CESA should not be given the same treatment as the municipality, where does that leave ratepayers who are effectively municipal customers? So basically, the rights of CESA Water are enshrined in a concession contract. So Ilembe is the water service authority, we're the water service provider. So that doesn't change the fact that we're still the water service provider. So the one thing that was very surprising in the judgment and conflicted in this judgment was, for the purposes of deeming us not to be a municipal customer, that's why we could be differentiated, was why they justified the tariff. However, for the purposes of levying cost, and normally if you're deemed private entity, you wouldn't get costs. But for the purposes of levying the costs of the matter, they deemed us a municipality and levied the costs on us. So it was a very, and that's why, I don't know if anyone's read that judgment, you'll find not all the judges agreed with the judgment. Is one of the few cases in the ConCourt judgment where you'll find a very scathing rebuttal from the other judges that disagreed with the judgment for their own peers. Normally, it's a very coordinated judgment. So so nothing changes in terms of CESA Water being the bulk water service provider. So the issue of cross-subsidization that Umgeni made mention with. So Umgeni claimed that for its many municipal customers, they have profitable and unprofitable schemes. One cross-subsidizes the other. They, however, did not give any evidence of this, nor provide which schemes they had or how they broke even on schemes. For example, at some municipalities were subsidized much further in terms of what they call a subsidy than others, including Ilembe District Municipality, and especially your rural municipalities. I think the only two that showed to be profitable municipalities were Umgungun Lovu and eThekwini, if I'm not correct. So in terms of what Umgeni claimed to be the cross-subsidization argument, it's actually very crazy, because it means that for us in Belito, we could have a tariff and then look at a customer in Itete or Shakaskral and have a different tariff for them. But the whole idea is you look at your business holistically and you determine a tariff. And I think that's how they've done it forever in terms of their overall model. So Umgeni claimed that the North Coast Pipeline, which was built around 2009, which not only services CESA and many other customers, including eThekwini and Ilembe District, and the cost of that should be recovered or justified from CESA. From all of this year, not once were we approached by Umgeni to take over any scheme of CESA. Now we operate treatment works, we operate a recycling plant. Not once did they make an attempt to say, well, okay, we'll negotiate with you. We're making a loss on X, and because that was their argument. So, there is another flawed argument from them, which if you see the Supreme Court of Appeals judgment was thrown out as well. So, and I think there's another question regarding the Ilembe district mayor. I was not privy to those discussions where he states that there's capital infrastructure outlaid that benefits CESA and the entire community, and CESA does not basically contribute to such. Now, the rights and obligations of CESA, as well as that of the Ilembe district, comes from the concession contract. The contract's reviewed every 5 years. So during those 5 years, we agree capital commitments, we agree who does what, and those are largely basically kept to this pretty severe sanction for CESA if we do not comply. And naturally, with a private entity, reputation is important for us. But since 1999, we've had not a single sanction of non-compliance with the contract at all. So, I'm not sure what the mayor referred to with regard to CESA benefiting from infrastructure, but over 50% of our profits annually go back into infrastructure. Okay, so, I'm not able to fathom or maybe that's a different discussion for a different time we can have when representatives of Ilembe are present, especially talking in the context of what the responsibility, every contract has responsibilities of two parties. So when parties just don't acknowledge their own responsibilities, sometimes it may lead, or don't know what their responsibilities are, could be a bit misleading. So in terms of the decision on the 41% increase, so thus far, since the judgment's been forthcoming, we've not received any correspondence from Umgeni Water, because I think the judgment also left them a little bit perplexed because it's very ambiguous. Is the tariff 41.4%? Is it 37.8%? No one really knows from that perspective. However, one thing the judgment did not do is set aside the settlement agreement between Umgeni Water and CESA Water. That agreement was put up in the pleadings, and as far as the council advised us, it's a valid agreement from that perspective. So we're sticking to the guns of that argument until Umgeni Water come to us otherwise, and then we take the matter forward from there. So does CESA Water contribute to the North Coast Pipeline? I think I've touched on this a little bit earlier. So the North Coast Pipeline, like I said, was constructed in 2009, services varying municipalities. And like us, we do capital infrastructure. If we have burst pipes, for example, on Simbiti Drive, we don't tell Simbiti, you're going to pay for it specifically. We basically have a resource, have a budget, and we replace that. We don't levy the charge back. Our tariff covers a portion of capital improvements, similar to any road that we would replace water mains. We wouldn't hold a single customer liable for that cost. And this is a specific requirement for someone that's requiring something extraordinarily from us. But from my knowledge, we've not implemented such. So from that perspective, in terms of cross-subsidization, so besides the normal tariff that Umgeni levy, there's maybe not levy was the right word, because they impose levies on the tariff. And the levies cover, for example, the Spring Grove Dam, which largely gives water security to Pietermaritzburg and eThekwini, as well as the future Amkomazi scheme. These account for approximately 15% of the Umgeni Water payments per month. So if you take, we probably pay in the region of 3 to 4 million rand to Umgeni every month. 15% of that is levies that do not directly impact our service, which means we cross-subsidize. So, the whole argument of cross-subsidization is a little bit flawed and misguided in terms of what they've pleaded and how they've gone about this. So I think the question was, should we have to implement this 41.4% increase? What would happen? Is it a big bang approach? Some questions that I did get telephonically was, are we backdating charges? So the answer is there'll be no backdating of charges. Once a tariff is approved by the municipality, by the council, it's a valid tariff. So we will not be recouping any of those funds from 2015 onwards from any of our consumers. I think having said that, I alluded to the settlement agreement in terms of what our advice has been thus far. And we're still fighting this because, to be honest, as CESA Water, we're neutral on what the tariff is, because it's a pass-through cost. Whether it'll be 10 Rand per kiloliter or 20 Rand per kiloliter, if it's more expensive, what it means is the end user pays more. If it's cheaper, the end user pays less. It's a simple mechanism from that perspective. So we don't see us looking to recoup any backdated charges. We can't tell you what it is, but if we had to implement, or Mgeni forced us to implement the 41.4% increase, and we were unsuccessful in any further litigation, we would look at a phased approach. I think it's just untenable for any business at this stage to implement a 41.4% increase. The economy is strained currently, and I think from a business perspective, it's just ethically incorrect from what we see. Our board has deliberated on this as well, and the same opinion. So this doesn't change the fact that CESA would remain as a water service provider. So we have our contract, and we adhere to the contract. So the one aspect was, if the minister doesn't approve the tariff, especially for water, who's the oversight body? Now, unlike electricity, where there's NERSA, there is no regulating body for water tariffs in South Africa. So there is legislation in terms of how water boards should go about determining the tariffs in terms of their financial models and in terms of the capital commitments, and a consultation process similar to municipalities that they do follow on an annual basis. So there's always been talk in the last 2 to 3 years of implementing a regulatory body for water and sanitation, and maybe the new minister would undertake that, but currently there is none. Okay, then is there any channels for ratepayers to engage with relevant stakeholders? So basically, I think, we are a very open company. We respond to queries that we get, whether it's from the media or organizations like DOCRRA or the Chamber of Commerce, and we're very open to that. And I did have correspondence from quite a few organizations stating that if there were any remote chance of trying to rescind the judgment, they would join the application with CESA Water. And I think DOCRRA's basically placed in a similar position. And I think we share that as well. So I think that's the list of questions, and I hope I've done justice to them. But for any points of clarity, I'm happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just repeat the question. Sure. Yes, Dion, and then Ken.
Long time no chat. I would just like to say thank you to acknowledge that CESA Water has always interacted and overall policy for periods with the team, and that served us well in that respect. Would like to know sort of a couple of things. One is that judgment seems to be absolutely nonsensical. And whilst I usually have quite a lot of respect for Concord, some of the decisions are just really fly in the face of logic. Like saying that just because you're a private company, as many said, it's a public partnership or some of the government is working on to try and put it in place. To now say that you're going to punish municipal members, which that's what we are, just because there's a public partnership is ludicrous. I think there's quite a few points that one could very well apply for the courts to rescind the decision if it's put in an appropriate way. Lastly, I'd just like to know, are we being charged a different rate to any of Afghani's other customers? Or with the cross subsidization, does that mean everybody pays the same rate? Therefore, some are subsidizing others who perhaps should be paying more. But are we actually paying the same rate, or are we paying different rates to people else?
So just for our Zoom guests, the first comment was thank you very much for the open door policy to CESA and for the presentation. The second statement from Dion was he believes that there is good grounds to challenge the Concord decision. And the third question was, is there a differential rate between what CESA charges us and Umgeni? So how do the rates compare across service delivery areas?
Thanks for that. I think with regard to the tariff in terms of uniformity, like I alluded to, so I'm going to have 3 tariffs, basically. The Caesar tariff, which you all know about now. The second one is all other municipal customers, save for eThekwini municipality. eThekwini enjoys a slight discount compared to every other municipal customer. So basically, in general, they have an average, but every year, the tariff escalation that they apply since the 40% increase has been uniformly applied to all of their customers from a percentage point of view, but not from a rand value point of view. So eThekwini make up 75 to 80% of Mgeni's revenue base. Hence, they enjoy a slightly higher discount factor. Every other municipality, Ugu, Ilembe, and I think even the Ladysmith, etc., have the same tariff. And our argument was that we stepped into the shoes of Ilembe and we should be treated the same as Ilembe. That was ruled by the High Court as well as the Supreme Court of Appeal. And there's case law in terms of what was ignored in the judgment as well. So the other question was, is there grounds? So our initial consultation took place with our junior counsel, who told us that there was no chance of rescinding the judgment, simply because the rescission application goes to the exact same judges that wrote this judgment. And it'll be highly embarrassing for the majority of those Concord judges to rescind their own judgment. It's not seen that they will actually do it. Even if someone thought they erred, it's very unlikely that they would. So I think that's why even then we sought, and we were pretty angry with the judgment, then we sought to get a new senior counsel in who advised us the exact same thing.
There are 72 judges.
Yeah, coming, but not yet.
Ken?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of queries, if I may, following on from what Leon just said. Is there any other authority? I mean, are you able to appeal to Parliament or the President? It's very clear, I mean, to us, ordinary common or garden citizens, non-legal, this seems to me that there's been a total miscarriage of justice in this whole process. How can an organisation that's been providing water for 22 years, and that for the first 15 years or so, had no questions about increasing rates for tariffs, how can that organisation be penalised when it's providing to citizens of South Africa? Is it possible to appeal? That's my first question. And sorry, as a completely separate kind of thing, how, and I'd just like you to make a few brief comments if you can, how is our water security going in this part of the world? You mentioned it. Is Azamere Dam up and running as designed, as proposed about 4 years ago, with all the extra civil engineering works to be done? That's the first one. And second of all, what's happening about the desalination plant that we were reviewing and advised about just south of us about 5 years ago? There's been absolutely no word about it. It's just been total silence. So the first question is there any other authority which you can appeal to, such as Parliament or President, in this whole process on the basis of a miscarriage of justice and maybe a lack of information that has gone through to the Concord? I don't know whether there's been a lack of provided. And second of all, just comment about water security.
Question from Ken Lever, just for our Zoom participants, was, is there any other authority that we could appeal to get this judgment changed or rescinded, like Parliament and so on? And the other one was a question on water security, both in supply and quality, I would imagine, Ken. Supply and quality, what's the current status? And also maybe just update us on the Hazelmere Dam. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so in terms of higher authorities, the Constitutional Court becomes the highest legal authority in South Africa. So once they pass a judgment, it basically sets precedent in terms of going forward, and that's a duly appointed committee, or you can say that by the president himself. So I think there's very little chance of that, but yeah, we could lobby political intervention if it was possible, and we've already written to the Ilembe District Municipality on this, and we are awaiting the municipal manager's response.
Well, there's an ethical and a political aspect to it, not just legal.
Yeah, sure. So I think we're also waiting for we're having a meeting actually tomorrow with our legal counsel to just explore some options after they've applied their minds to the judgment as well. So, we will take that as it comes, and we definitely will explore every option we can to try to overturn the judgment if it's ever possible and remotely favorable for us. You have our commitment on that. With regard to Hazelmere Dam and water security, so the Hazelmere Dam upgrade is the function of the Department of Water Sanitation. I'm not sure if they've managed to get the repair or the remedial work done to allow the dam to go back to its new 100%. But currently the dam is a healthy position. It's probably more than double the capacity of the old dam that we have. Secondly, Umgeni Water are testing bringing water to us from the Lower Tugela scheme already. So I think there are some technical issues that they're battling with in terms of pressures and stuff, but I think if push comes to shove in terms of water security, the capacity of the Lower Tugela scheme is there to alleviate some of the stresses that we may have on the Hazelmere system. Secondly, the Amkomazi scheme, the reason the desalination plant is basically sort of mothballed or put on the back burner is the Amkomazi scheme is taking priority. That alleviates the stress on Hazelmere in the long term as well, which allows this area to get water from there. But I think the long-term plan for Umgeni is to supply the greater Ilembe area, including Belito, from the Lower Tugela works. And currently the works is only done its first phase of 55 megs, and I think it's not producing maximum capacity if operating at about 40% of its capacity. So there's plenty surplus capacity and the room for upgrade of that plant as well. In terms of water quality, I think Umgeni Water do produce very good quality water. And I think, it's one of the water boards that have very good quality and good people that still run their systems, and their systems are run pretty well from a quality perspective. So I don't think we need to fear a quality perspective from Umgeni.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The reason for water security queries is that our environmental scientists are telling us that in 10 years, not 20 years, not 30 years, in 10 years' time, we're going to be hit by severe droughts in this part of Southern Africa.
Yeah.
And I presume this is being factored in to the whole equation and design process for providing water, which is why I do think we cannot possibly ignore desalination along this coast. Anyway, thank you for your comments. Sure. Thank you for your efforts and energies.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one thing, can I ask one? Before the drought in 2009, the tariff for more usage was very was static. After that date, you were penalized for more usage, and bulk usage is a much higher tariff than normal usage. Is there any way that bulk tariff could be, if you're a business and you're using water, that you could have a reduction, or is not possible?
Your name, sir?
Trevor.
Trevor.
Thank you. A question from Trevor is the tariff for water after 2009. There was a penalty implemented for excessive use or increased use, and that still remains. And whether there's a differentiation between single use or single point use and bulk supply, tariff differentiation, businesses, for example. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I think in terms of how we've modeled our financial model and the tariff structure, we have a uniform tariff that's applicable to all our users, basically commercial and residential. For the purpose of I think when the drought hit in 2014, we did impose what we call the penalty in terms of those that went over the threshold of the savings. There was a 30% requirement to save and 50%. Those remain part of the tariff only in restriction periods. They're not applied in other periods, but there's no special tariff in terms of single-use businesses at all. It's a uniform tariff. Well, what would happen is when you holistically look at your basket of costs and your tariff, if you don't apply the uniform tariff to businesses and you get a discount, it means the residential tariff will go up to cross-subsidize each other. So we just adopted to have a uniform tariff for everybody.
So you mean certain usage, any about that, everybody pays the same.
Well, basically, the same tariff and the bands of your tariff are identical. There's no separate bands for commercial or residential. It's identical.
Another question. Okay. Currently, we are paying for water a certain tariff, and then we're paying for sewage, which is connected to that. To me, the tariff for sewage is much higher, but the more water I use, the higher it's connected. Yeah. So clear on that. My question is, if we're going to go 40%, is it only going to be 40% on the water, or is this also going to influence the sewage charge as well?
Interesting question from Flip. He normally does that. Is if the water supply is going to, the cost is going to increase by 41% and the sewage is linked to that rate, will that be increasing at 41% as well?
Yeah, okay, the answer is no, simply because the drivers for the two tariffs are different. Bulk water forms the majority and the biggest cost for water supply. Electricity is the biggest, one of the biggest cost factors on sewer, simply because everything flows downhill to the coast and then we have to pump it up. That's why sewer is actually a more expensive service to render. So there wouldn't be the same levying of sewer charges as water. There may be an approach to say, well, you could, instead of going 40% of the water, because not everybody may have sewer, for example, is to average them out. But I think those discussions we take with the Lembe district in terms of the application of the tariff.
Any other questions?
One last thing. Thanks. I just want to know, is this private-public partnership model anywhere else in the country? I know because the Dolphin, I spoke to a few members of the Dolphin Borough municipality, and and I asked them what was the reason why they brought this partnership into play in 1998. And they said, obviously with aging infrastructure and, supplying a good service to the community, they felt that if they outsourced it, it would in a private partnership, they were able to service the community in a good way. So obviously, I don't know, the government has been talking about private partnerships, but now if we're going to be penalized for those, because we're getting a better or more efficient service in the municipality, who should have been taking a portion of their rates and putting it back into infrastructure, which they haven't. And now, obviously, we've got a lot of collapsed infrastructure out of it. Is there anywhere in the country that this model has been looked at?
A question from Penny is there anywhere else in the country where either Caesar Water or other public-private partnerships are providing water, and do they have the same kind of problem that you have?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Penny, yes, there's another private-public partnership for water and sanitation in Mbombela. It's formerly Nelspruit, but we also own that concession. It's called Sililumanzi. We don't have the problem that we're having here simply because we run all of the water treatment work. So we're the bulk water service provider, and we supply water to the municipality in that vicinity. So we don't have the issue of relying on a water board. We become, in essence, the water board because we supply ourselves water as well as to the municipality. So yeah, the issues of ring fencing, etc., and the history of Caesar Water, I think that's why the decision was taken. But it was also taken because it wasn't financially viable for the then Dolphin Coast Transitional Council to pay back the loans they had for water and sanitation, and also to cope with the development that was going to come. So part of our contract when we took over was to pay up those loans of government. So the mistake maybe we made was paying them upfront. And I think that's come to hurt us because people think that you're getting a free ride. But the problem is, if you had to pay 60, 70 million rand in 1999, it was a hell of a lot of money to be an operator, and you take risk for 30 years thereafter.
One last question, sorry. So after your 8 years, does all the infrastructure that you have invested go back to the municipality, or do they have to buy it back from, or is that too technical?
Penny, a last question was, firstly, is it your contract still runs for another 8 years, and hopefully you'd like to extend it, and hopefully we can assist you. Maybe just a comment on that. And then does the improvements and the infrastructure that you've done go back to the municipality if you do not extend or get the contract extended?
Yeah, so basically all infrastructure will be handed over to the Lembe district at no cost, at zero cost. So that is the contract. And I think, and we also put up a performance bond to make sure that the infrastructure still performs efficiently from that perspective. And there's engineering assessments that will be done on handover as well. So they also take over the staff of Caesar Water. So you still have institutional knowledge if that comes to that. In terms of the contract has a mechanism for extension, but those have been overruled by subsequent legislation governing municipalities and the tendering and contracting processes. So those discussions will have to be taken at a different level at that stage and to ensure transparency and compliance for them.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Shyam, thank you very, very much for a very frank, very open, very interesting discussion, and for handling all the questions we sent and all the other questions that came along as well. I think you know that we are, as a community, very pleased and happy with your service, and wherever we can cooperate and assist, know that you can just give us a call. We've got a dedicated committee. Penny is very involved, and we're going to be staying on this issue for as long as we have to, because water obviously is a critical resource for us. But thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for the service that you give. I'm calling on Flip. Let me just get this to the right. Here we go. Thank you, Flip. Jy moet versigtig stap hier, Boet. Dis nou baie kaal.
Okay, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we had an experience which I don't think none of us expected. Through that, something wonderful happened, and I want to introduce to you Warwick Chapman. 6 weeks ago, I didn't know who Warwick Chapman was. Now we do. Warwick was schooled here in KZN. He's actually grew up here. He left us for a while. He matriculated in 1999 from Glenwood. The Chapman family are well known here in Ballito. Sure, you know who I refer to. We all know about the Chapmans. Warwick has founded an IT company in 2000. It ran for about a decade, and then he decided to go into business politics. Well, he left the business for foreign politics. He served 2 terms on the Durban City Council before he moved to Cape Town, where he headed up the technology at the Democratic Alliance. In 2017, he returned to the North Coast, and that was just before the birth of his son. Warwick now runs a renewable energy company based here in KZN, very close to us. And he also consults with political organizations internationally. Okay. Warwick, all over to you. Let's just see that I miss out something. Warwick is now, I have to read this because I won't, it is now the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Ballito Organization Center. He can tell you all about that. Thanks, Warwick.
No problem. That one's worse.
I'll also be versigtig.
Jy het lang bene.
Yo!
Yeah, thanks. The Chief Executive of the Greater Ballito Operations Center. Those are 2 tongue twisters that were basically invented on the spot. I would say partly arbitrarily or randomly. But I'll tell you a little bit about how the GBOC came into existence. And I guess you got to know a little bit about us during that time and what we were up to. And we've had a bit to say over the past month or so since things simmered down. But there's quite a lot of appetite for something along the lines of what we saw emerge during the crisis to be carried forward. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But what I'd really like us to do at the end is just have a bit of a discussion. I'm sure there's some questions, there may be even some criticisms or concerns, and I'd be very happy for us to talk about that. So you know, I've said before that I think that one of the reasons why Ballito managed to defend itself during the unrest was because some key individuals reacted maybe 4 to 8 hours earlier than some other towns. And I really think that that made a big difference for us. There was enough of an opposing force at the key entrance points to the town early enough that it just wasn't feasible for looters and rioters and worse to get into the town and cause any damage. Now, I had nothing to do with that. There's names like Rion Verster and Gustav Fick and Mark Whitehead and people like that who used their own networks to try and mobilize people randomly and you know, just among the networks that they had at their disposal in order to get our defense mustered as quickly as possible. What I was part of was a Teams meeting that was called on Monday afternoon. It was Monday, hey Mark, or was it Sunday? No, it definitely wasn't Tuesday. It's actually quite difficult. I think it was Monday, and really that meeting helped us to put in place the first kind of organization or coordination of what ended up being a very, very long Monday night. Particularly for those of you who might live in Caledon or at Shortens, Monday night was quite hairy early Tuesday morning. And one of the first things that emerged during that Monday night was the concept of air traffic control, because we had the Zimbali, M4, Ballito Bridge, Sharkers Bridge, Tiffany's, and then we had the Flag Farm and Sheffield, what's that functions place called? Oh, Grand Exotic. Those were the spots that we were trying to man, as well as a post down by Caledon. And so what was air traffic control? Air traffic control was there's a vehicle that's just skipped the stop at the M4. Can the guys at the Ballito Bridge be alerted that this vehicle needs to be stopped? So that was one of the first roles that I was playing in the beginning, was watching all of the communication was happening and then trying to link it up. And you know, that kind of example that I gave you, I think probably happened 8 or so times over the key days, say Monday to Wednesday, Monday to Thursday, where we probably arrested maybe 6 to 8 different individuals or sets of individuals. When I say arrested, I mean detained and then called SAPs to arrest for looting or being in possession of looted goods, that kind of thing. And it's quite remarkable, surreal to even think, to even hear myself saying this. You know, us citizens on the bridges, they're intercepting people who could have shot us in the face, but fortunately didn't. You know, detaining them and then phoning SAPs up to collect them. And in those first couple of days, that was the only time that we saw the SAPS, was when we asked them to come in and pick guys up that we had detained. And often they sat there on the side of the road or the bridge for a couple of hours until SAPs arrived. But that air traffic control role became a role that myself and Rion Verster and Jean Blichtnout and Margaret van der Wester, Margaret Westerhoff, whatever her name is now. People like, you know, these names were on the end of WhatsApp groups, and this was just kind of happening because it had to happen, right? Rion says, hey, Warwick, I've been doing this, you know, since 6 this afternoon. It's now 2 in the morning. I need to get some sleep. Do you think you can take over? Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll do that. I'll see you at 6 in the morning. And then Jean appears, and it was just something that came together in the moment because it had to. And then you had someone like Mark emerging as the person who was going from bridge to bridge to bridge, helping to motivate and inform the guys, helping to you know, keep them advised of what we were learning and what we knew and what we needed them to do, especially what we needed them to be super careful of. We needed them to be very, very careful from obviously a safety perspective. We were increasingly concerned about allegations of racism and racist incidents and discrimination and whatever. And Mark had a really important role over that time to try and get some semblance of organization in what was always going to be a disorganized operation. These are not trained policemen. They are not soldiers. They are not really susceptible to command and control. We are random civilians rocking up with guns, or in some cases, I think one of my classic quotes from the whole thing, yes, it's Ryan here, Warwick. I don't have a gun, but I'm great with a 5-iron, was one of the good lines. Random people, men and women, some who were, yes, sir, no, sir, how can I help? And others who were like, I don't care who you are, what other people say about you, but I'm going to go and murder that guy. And there wasn't a hell of a lot we could do about it. We aren't the colonel or whatever. So Monday passed, Tuesday passed. At about 3 o'clock on Tuesday morning, Rian and I said, what about shops tomorrow morning? Hopefully nobody opens any shops. I mean, up until that moment, we'd all been in this kind of crazy grasping, holding pattern of just trying to hold everything together and make sure that nothing disastrous happened in a relatively uncoordinated way. And as it turns out, a couple of the shops did, of their own accord, decide to open on Wednesday. And it was pandemonium on the bridges because the guys manning the checkpoints didn't know that the shops were open. There was now a big demand from the outside to get in. And up until that point, we were actually unofficially under instruction from SAPS to be very diligent about who we let in and who we didn't let in. There were some unofficial recommendations that SAPS also made to us, which I'll tell you in private if you want, but suffice to say, as the de-escalation process happened, the law of the land returned and we had to stop doing those things, right? One of which was blocking the roads. So after the chaos of Wednesday morning, it became very, very clear that we needed more coordination. And independently, there were sort of two initiatives to try and get something like a joint operations center in place. I've worked in many political campaigns over the years, and they're quite complex, multifaceted operations, and they all have various levels of operations sort of centers running them. So, I had this kind of unsatisfied itch about how we needed to get more coordination and integration and communication. And Brian Wright and Kobus and Dieter from the URP and the chamber were also kind of moving in this direction. As it turned out, pretty early on Wednesday morning, I phoned up Kobus and I said, this is what I'm thinking. And he said, well, actually, there's a meeting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. They're looking to do the same kind of thing. So in the meantime, I spoke to the Salt Rock Hotel, and incredibly, and let me just tell you that this happened so many times over those days. We wanted skips, we asked, we got them. We wanted 10 toilets, we asked, we got them. Not only did we get them, they said, where can we drop them off for you? Barbed wire, sign writing, megaphones, food, coffee, everything that we needed or wanted during that time. Local businessmen, local residents stood up and helped us to get those things. So we really, really grateful for all of that. The Salt Rock Hotel said, there, as you walk in the hotel, the first room on your right, the Marlin room, that's yours. You can have it for as long as you need. If you need hotel rooms, if you need food, the hotel is at your disposal. Absolutely incredible. So at 3 o'clock, we went to this meeting in the car park at the quarters upstairs there where the chambers offices are. And Brian Wright, which I think many of you will know from the URP and from Urban Management, his company. Brian sort of performed magic. He facilitated the creation of the Greater Ballita Operations Center among, I don't know, 45 people, various representatives, some stragglers who had kind of caught wind of this thing, some people none of us had ever seen before. KDM didn't arrive, they were invited. SAPS did arrive, they were invited. And Brian helped us to break up into about 7 different work streams. Security being one of them, retail being one of them, infrastructure and utilities being another one of them, fuel being another, logistics. There were about 7. And he helped us to kind of think about and discuss what it was that were priorities in each of those work streams, and then to appoint one person to be in charge, spokesperson, representative, captain, whatever you want to call it, of that particular work stream. And before we broke into the work streams, we also discussed about the fact that there was a kind of parallel effort to try and establish a JOC. And Brian, I know from back when I was a councillor in eThekwini, and he established the Mhlanga URP, and a kind of consensus emerged, okay, Warwick, you're going to do this. And 10 or 20 minutes later, there was this random title of chief executive that emerged. And shortly thereafter, there was this literally a group of people shouting random things until someone said, okay, fine, Greater Ballita Operations Center. And then everyone was like, let's go home. So from the first meeting of the retail cluster on that concrete parking area on Wednesday afternoon, the agreement was close down shopping on Thursdays so we can put a proper plan in place to open on Friday. It was a very unpopular decision at the time. And I remember a very intimidating member of some of the local private security who was resident giving us a very hard time about moms needing formula and stuff like that for babies. But we didn't really have a choice. We had to make sure that there was a clear plan in place that satisfied what the retailers needed and that particularly satisfied the safety side of things. So from first thing on Thursday morning, it was meetings with retailers, and then KDM arrived on the bridge, unannounced, and told us to get rid of our barricades. Now, Thursday was pretty early in the process to tell us to get rid of the barricades. Like, we weren't out of the woods, and we were really still quite concerned at that point that there was more unrest on the way. But what particularly peeved us, and I think this was reflected by the sheer number of people that got to the bridge, was KDM didn't come and say, we see the work that all of you guys have been doing, but just understand there's a problem here and we need you to please, let's talk about how we're going to de-escalate this thing. They came onto the bridge and they started pushing us around and telling us what to do. And after everything that we had been through, in the complete absence of them, like literally the first time we see them is when they're on the bridge, you know, telling us what to do. And it didn't go down well, as I'm sure many of you know. And in fact, it was quite an inflammatory situation. And when I made remarks earlier about people not caring who Mark or I were, they were going to do their own thing, that bridge situation could have turned out very, very bad. And some of the most aggressive voices on that bridge were from residents in Sharkers Head, not wanting the barricades to be removed. We eventually managed to convince KDM to decamp to the Salt Rock Hotel, and we could have an orderly conversation about the barricades. As it turned out, a politician had been turned away at one of our barricades, at one of our checkpoints, and his nose was sufficiently out of joint that we had to deal with that distraction. We turned that situation around so that we co-opted KDM to helping us with the opening of shopping on the Friday. SAPs were on board as well. And although it was a rather fraught process, by 8 o'clock that night, we had the plan and we were able then to communicate it to everyone. We're very, very nervous about how Friday was going to turn out. Mark in particular worked hell of a hard to manage the traffic around the junction area. As it turns out, it went off really well. I mean, it was very, very busy in the morning, but by Thursday afternoon, there were virtually no queues anywhere. I mean, by Friday afternoon, there were virtually no queues anywhere. And Saturday and Sunday and into the next week, I think shopping was fairly painless. One of the major points of contention, many of you will recall during that time, was this question of what is the Greater Ballito area? Who's included, who's not included? And it's actually the kind of genesis of that vagueness is interesting and certainly a point of criticism. I see Tammy there, who was one of the people who made it very clear to me at the time she wasn't happy with it. But it was deliberate. We didn't know what Friday was going to turn out like. We had no idea. And still, right up to that point, we were actually under this unofficial instruction from SAPS to be very, very strict about who we let into the town and who we didn't. So the communique and this kind of random, vague definition of Greater Ballito people only was really to try and help reduce this massive influx of kind of panic buying from people out of the area. If we could just discourage enough people so that we didn't have a panic on the Friday, then hopefully things could return to normal in the days that followed. And so fortunately, nobody was turned away on the Friday. There were a few Westbrook residents, for example, who let me know their displeasure at being asked where they were from. But they were obviously still let in. On the Friday, we then had the problem, sorry, on the Saturday, we then had the problem with SAPS asking us to remove the barricades. And that one was somewhat of a different situation. Again, we were really quite irritated that the first time we saw SAPS anywhere in force was when they were arriving unannounced. They knew who we were. We'd been working together in partnership for, 3 or 4 days, nearly a week by that point. Instead of coming to talk to us about the instruction that they got from provincial office, they arrived on the bridges and started sort of bullying us around. And again, that just didn't sit well certainly with me, but definitely with the volunteers on the bridges. So again, we managed to convince SAPS to decamp to the hotel, and they sent the colonel from the cluster, Colonel Matura. I think he's the cluster commander. And fantastic meeting Colonel Matura. It was a very hard, long day. I think it took 6 hours, but in the end, it was clear there was a political decision. There was an instruction from the provincial commissioner's office. There was no getting around it. We had to have those barricades removed. We were told that there was a public order policing unit that had been dispatched to assist us to remove the barricades. And we all, if you really want a bitter taste in your mouth, the first time you hear of public order policing during this crisis is to get you to remove the barricades. So that wasn't lekker either. But Mark and I were also told fairly directly that we would be held directly responsible if the barricades weren't removed. I will say that by that point, it was clear to us that the whole situation had sufficiently de-escalated that it probably was around about the right time for us to start removing what were very illegal barricades. And in the few days that followed, which were the first few days of the next week, it was clear to us that actually we had a responsibility to get our volunteers off of those checkpoints as soon as possible, because the situation had de-escalated to the point where, at least from a security perspective, we were back to normal. There were obviously, you'll recall, all of those horrendously terrifying voice notes going around, which meant that the kind of psyche wasn't normalized, but actually the security situation was. And keeping our volunteers on post during that time was actually exposing them unnecessarily to danger. So I think a couple of days ahead of a lot of like the Durban areas that seemed to stay on, some of them for weeks longer, we demobilized and got everyone off the bridges and handed over officially to SAPS, who really have to be commended for the sheer number of police officers that they allocated to the task, and for the, I think, full week that they policed all of our checkpoints 24/7 during that second week. So now that whole thing is done, right? During that process, SAPS also made it clear to us that we couldn't have this random rabble of civilians manning checkpoints, that the only legitimate way of having civilians assisting the police was through the community policing forums, the legal structure of the community policing forums. So we started getting bibs made and trying to incorporate the CPFs into the operation, at least operationally into the operation. And you know, then things settled down and we all tried to get to work the next week. Since then, there've been a few other matters that have arisen, and we've been able to reuse the GBOC platform to host a few meetings, to get a bit of consensus, to have a bit of collaboration, to get some integration. But I think critically, at times, to put out some communication about things that we are aware of or concerns that people were having. I think there's two big questions about the way forward. The first one is, if unrest or some other disaster or something happens again, how do we spin up that kind of response in a way that's a bit more organized and that has the risks mitigated to a greater extent? You know, fortunately, we didn't have any disasters. You know, in Durban North, there was a guy shot through the lung. One of the civilian militia, whatever you want to call him, that could easily have happened on our side. And if that did happen in the future, you know, how do we respond to that? What plans do we have in place to try and make sure that that's dealt with as quickly as possible? So that's the first priority. There's a lot of anxiety around the 23rd and the messaging around the 23rd, and maybe there's some questions about that as well. And then there seems to be quite a lot of interest in the concept of some kind of overarching umbrella entity that isn't replacing any existing structures in our community, but that is working to integrate, coordinate, to stimulate collaboration, and particularly to communicate effectively about what's going on. And hopefully in the next, potentially on Saturday, but we haven't finalized the date yet. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks, the team will now come together. We will debrief what happened over the past 6 weeks, and we'll try and address the meat of those two questions. Certainly the question around our ability to mobilize and respond and organize is something that needs to be addressed in some detail before Monday, given some of the concerns around the 23rd. But as to the longer term question and function of the GBOC, I don't want to speak or speculate too much on that, because I really think that the core role players that were involved need to be able to, given that opportunity, to workshop on what they think the role should be. So that's where we are, I guess. I want to once again just recognize all of those individuals for their contribution during that time. I think it's important that people stand up and put themselves in the firing line, as it were, in order to fill roles that need to be filled. And there were loads and loads of people. I mean, I cannot tell you how complex the rostering system was behind all of those shifts on the bridges. And there were 1,200 volunteers that needed to be organized. And there was almost a need for a roster of rostering staff, you know, at one stage. There was a massive operation getting food and drink to the bridges, especially during the early hours of the morning. There was technology happening in the background, software being developed, and there was all sorts of physical infrastructure being donated, money, signs, all sorts of things. People came forward and they were incredibly generous. business people and local businesses in particular. So I just want to reiterate my personal thanks for all of that. And then I also think it's important to thank all of the moms who, a lot of moms stayed at home in a situation where they were incredibly anxious. They had to look after kids on their own, husbands away. And so, in addition to all of that, they've got to worry about what's going on. I know for my wife, it was a very, very difficult time. So I think that was an important contribution, but she was always saying to me, no, get out there, go and do it. It needs to be done. I'll handle things here. And I was very grateful for that. So I think, let me stop talking. Mark is also here. So if there are any questions directed at Mark, I'd also like him to be able to answer, but maybe let's have some questions and discussion and then can let you carry on with your meeting. Yes, sir.
Thanks so much. Have you had any positive inputs from residents in Sharper's Head and say Sharper's Kraal? Basically, one has to think about forewarning, advance warning, and how does that get coordinated? But I don't think it can just be the coastal strip.
I'll repeat it. His name's Ken.
Pale places.
Sure, 100%. Ken's question was, has there been any feedback or input from the Sharper's Head community in particular, and emphasizing that this operation just can't be involving those of us from this side of the road? I think that that's one of the greatest products of the whole crisis. Is I really do think it literally has brought us closer. As Mark has said a few times, those bridges are now figurative in a big way, because the GBOC from the beginning had representatives from Sharper's Head there. On Tuesday, that peace, that truce was brokered on that side of the bridge, and from that moment, we had representatives of Sharper's Head community and the taxi association had permanent seats in the operations center at Saltrock Hotel. What I will tell you is that prior to the unrest, this is a personal piece of feedback, prior to the unrest, I had a sense that staff members living in Sharper's Head were too scared to tell us what was going on for fear of retribution. In the days immediately after the event, we seemed to have this tidal wave of information being fed to us from people who were like, well, the fact that I'm potentially at risk isn't more important than that this information needs to be known. And so that channel of comms seems to be very open. But the relationships that we have established with key individual leaders in the Sharper's Head community have been very valuable. And the relationship that's been established with the Taxi Association, as controversial as it might be, has also been valuable. Whether we like it or not, they're a fundamental component of our economy and our community. And they've got some serious ears and ears on the ground and eyes out there. And they have to, as a function of just the way that they run their businesses. So the Taxi Association has been very important from an information perspective. Well, we've also been forced to go out there and say, all right, who else is out there that has an ear to the ground? Who has a network of Izinduna in the area that they are plugged into? All right, let's talk to them on a regular basis. Who has some connections into the shady underworld? Let's talk to them on a regular basis. And so we've been doing that, and it's given us, it gave us the ability, in the end of the first week, in the beginning of the second week, to say we knew that nothing was going on. There was absolutely no titter, there was no jabber, there was no chatter, there was nothing going on at that time. And I mean, I think understandably so when you think back. Anyone who stuck their head above the parapet back then would have had some trouble. And for what it's worth, I think that's what's going to happen on the 23rd. You've got 25,000 soldiers deployed. You've got SAPs basically with their biggest mobilization that they've had since 1994. They are now on 12 hours on, 12 hours off shifts. Doesn't matter whether you had a desk job before, whether you were a detective or whatever, you're now out there trying to maintain public order. And so there are cops everywhere, and everyone's under very, very strict instruction to make sure that no unrest can happen again. So if the guys do want to organize on the 23rd, they're going to have to be willing to really fight. And if they are going to really fight, where are they organized? Where are they training? Where are they arming? And how is it possible that we are hearing absolutely nothing about it? So don't get me wrong, and maybe Mark can reiterate this. We aren't saying that we are doing nothing. We are saying that every little ear that we've got out there is telling us that nothing has happened. But as I just said to you, we're going to try and meet on Saturday, and we're going to try and make sure that we have some more clarity around our mobilization and response plan in the unlikely event that something happens. Mark?
Two comments. I mean, first and foremost, taxes. For anybody to mobilize, you need vehicles. So the only way you can mobilize with the support of the taxi association. And that's what happened in the initial part of this inspection. Certain elements of this taxi association made agreements, and the agreements were honored to a part. And I think what happened during the xenophobia, saying people were involved, those were not control runs. And basically, as a result of that, they had wheels and the ability to mobilize. What happened subsequently thereafter was the vast majority of the taxi association realized what's going on here is not what happened previously. And as such, we cannot allow this to continue because we will be out of business. So the capitalists within the taxi association realized that they need to close ranks, which they did, and they then started to actually de-escalate the situation and sort out those members within their ranks that were not playing line. So the logistics behind this, the way that these guys mobilized was cut. The rug was pulled out from underneath. So for the 23rd, our relationship with the taxi association, we've been told categorically that there will be no support from the taxi association. And I think we've seen this with all the attempts now over the last month to try and get this thing going again. The information with the position of the taxi association has been unwavering, right? And their support for us has also been unwavering. So we're very grateful for that relationship. The other leg that they're trying to pull, these people that have started this insurrection, let's call them the REP, for Economic Transformation movement, is they're trying to pull on the unions and the municipalities. Now, understand that is core to the ANC, and the ANC is pulling rank there like a carrot leaf. But will unions exploit this? Yes, they will. I mean, just after that, I was telling Malcolm early on, Sakar was already telling the government we want access to our pensions. So they are going to utilize anything they can. But I can assure you now, as I sit here, I somehow struggle to see how the municipalities and the unions there would support something that would actually take, like the taxi association, take away what they are actually all working for their jobs. They would lose their jobs through this process. So I do think that there will always still be elements within this REP movement, and there are ways and means that this thing could go in different shapes and ways. And it's not for us to speculate tonight. But I do think that we need to be alert, and this is why we will have our meeting and we'll have our prepared state like we did for long weekend prior to Jacob Zuma's court case. We will work on our plans and how we mobilize and what we do. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, if things go pear-shaped, we are well within our rights to defend ourselves like we did before. Okay, SAPS will look after what they need to look after, which is infrastructure and the ports and the dams and power stations and the roads, etc., because they are only so many. You've got the SANDF as well that will do and provide support. I do think that it would be, if things went pear-shaped, it would be back to us defending ourselves. But I think we did a sterling job, and we'll do the same again to bridge the divide until SAPS can come to our rescue, or Metro, or things. So I'm not worried as I sit here, and I'm worried to say to you, in the situation I landed in, I had to build up networks of people, and there's now 5 layers of intel that we've actually utilized. I mentioned that all the updates I gave the guys at the roadblocks. Those 5 layers are still saying it's crickets. Nothing is going to happen. All right, so these guys will try and try and try because they've played their hand. Frustration for me is the wheels of justice are moving too slow. And until the head of the snake has been removed, there will always be risk. So that's why we need to be alert. Thanks, Lawrence.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sure you still have a meeting you want to have. Is there time for any further discussion, or do you want me to wrap it up?
I think you can wrap it, Warwick. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me then close by giving one last sincere thanks to every individual who showed up for a shift or contributed in any way to what was quite a miraculous defense of our town. And the result of that is that if there were 50,000 jobs provided by our area before the unrest, there are still 50,000 jobs provided after the unrest. And we are the breadbasket of the region now, because this is where people come shopping. And then to DOCRRA, thank you for the invitation. And I'll ask you with my small kids at home if I can be excused and go back to them. And thank you for everything that DOCRRA does in this community. Cheers.
Thank you, Warwick. There's definitely a lot of thank yous. Warwick says individuals. He cannot mention anybody by name because that is going to take forever. And there was, the cooperation was just phenomenal between more than what you just see here. Warwick became the leader of that, but believe me, he says DOCRRA, but there are other organizers as well. The neighborhood watches, the CPFs, everybody came together. The police as well. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bill.
So don't go away too soon.
Flip, thank you, and Warwick, thank you very much. He's left already, but Mark, you'll carry our thanks. I think a round of applause on behalf of the community, the Greater Belita community, the Dolphin Coast community, to this GBOC initiative that kept us safe and kept us sound. I think coming together, accepting leadership and working together like everybody did was quite amazing and set a great example. So a big round of applause on both. Ladies and gents, we're coming to the last end of our meeting, and I think it is fitting that we just share with you what DOCRRA has been busy with subsequent to the financial year ending in February, and I'm going to go through them fairly promptly. The first was the roads and traffic study. Much promised. We've heard about it for about 2 years. It was done by a company called SMEG, financed by a lot of property investors, and eventually that came available for public comment and for stakeholder comment, and DOCRRA was approached to do comment. My thanks to Ken Lever, who put together a subcommittee, and they spent many hours going through these reports. Just to highlight for you, whenever you get a report from the municipality, whatever form, it seems that the minimum benchmark is 400 pages. Privy, 400 pages. That seems to be the minimum benchmark. The other day we were attending a council meeting, and we can only sit on Zoom and be quiet and listen, and they were quoting an agenda point, and they said, go to page 800 and something. Okay, that was for a council meeting at the end of the month. So I don't know how you councillors cope. No wonder some of you are wearing glasses already. So the road and traffic study had a very comprehensive input from Ken and his committee that was submitted to the municipality. What has subsequently happened, and I think that the submission that Ken did, comprehensive as it was, obviously with other submissions and feedback, led to the council deciding that they need an overall strategic traffic road and traffic plan, because this study did not include pedestrian walkways. It didn't include other roads which were problems and intersections which were problems, which were all the things that Ken highlighted in their report. So there is a new, further extended research being done by a consulting company. We've heard some presentations from them from the council, and this is a longer term plan to look at the whole traffic and pedestrian movement and vehicle movement in our node, which is, as you know, very fast developing. So we will keep our tabs on it. We'll see how it develops. And when that new one comes out, we'll have our input again. Then came property revaluations. Now, we knew about this because we were alerted about it a year ago. So we had a subcommittee that started investigating the minute that this was announced. We got a legal opinion that we made available to our members on the process to follow to object if you were not satisfied with the property revaluations. Some interesting things emerged, that the previous property valuations were done inadequately or insufficiently, and a lot of properties had not been revalued, plus which the timing, which is normally 4 years, 4 to 5 years between property revaluations, in some cases was 6 or 7 years. So people were paying rates and taxes on incorrect or undervalued properties going back 6 or 7 years. Suddenly, they appointed a fairly good company that now used aerial photography and drones and you name it, and they then came up with a very comprehensive evaluation. So older properties suddenly were faced with a valuation going from 1.5 million to 4.5 million, which is massive. The 4.5 million may have been market related, but it had grown and they are now going to be paying rates and taxes on a 4.5 million because it was incorrectly valued before. There were quite a lot of properties that were valued incorrectly and people were asked to put in objections. We supplied a process and assisted with the forms on our website, and a good number of people had put in their objections. These were supposed to be responded to by the end of June. Not many have been responded to, and these should have been revalued or reconsidered before the end of June for the new year. This also did not happen. So no recognition of the objections and no revaluations. We then again consulted our legal guys, and we now make available to our members the opportunity to declare a dispute. If you go to the municipality and you declare a dispute that, guys, this was the time, I've put in my objection, here are the grounds on why we put in an objection, and the fact, and you have not come back to me, you can declare a dispute, and the municipality is not allowed to cut off your water and lights until they've resolved your dispute. So we are recommending, and those forms are available, the legal opinion is available. If you have not, if you really feel strongly that your property is valued above market value and is not correct, then you can declare a dispute and there's a process to do so. What also happened is that a lot of updating of records didn't happen. So people that had an open piece of land and were paying rates and taxes on an open piece of land, but had now developed it, maybe 5 years later, had built a house on it. The municipality did not update their records. So you carried on paying on a piece of open land, rates and taxes, comfortably thinking that that's your rates and taxes. Now suddenly with the drones and the aerial photography, they discovered, oops, there's a property on there. And they've gone back and they've hit you with rates and taxes going back 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So in some of those cases, these are massive amounts, 70,000, 100,000 Rand. That's a different situation because rates and taxes, unfortunately, does not prescribe. It is a tax, and tax does not prescribe, does not prescribe for 30 years. However, when we spoke to our legal guy, he said to us, every year, a property valuation roll is published and signed off, and on that signature, the rates and taxes are raised. So he has a legal opinion that says they cannot backdate those claims going back 6 or 7 years, even although they haven't been prescribed, because they did not publish it in their rates valuation policy at the beginning of the financial year. But that is his opinion, and we make available to our members this opinion. So if that is the situation that you're in, we are recommending that you consider legal advice, depending on the amount of money involved. We can't give you a blanket statement. We can't say that you can declare a dispute. There's a different process to be followed. So if our members are in that kind of situation, I know there are quite a few Zimbabwe members and there are quite a few other members that this is the situation. We recommend that you contact us and we will give you that advice. And if you need to have a reference to a lawyer that is doing this for others, then DOCRRA has contracted a lawyer, and he'll give you good rates, and you can challenge the municipality on that. So we haven't had the outcome of that yet. What we did do is negotiate with the municipality during the budget process. We were very eager to understand what the rebate is that we were going to be given to ease in this revaluation. The rebate that was offered is 25%. We were then keen to see how long we can extend that 25%. And I'm pleased to say that we've got commitment from the municipality that it will be extended for at least a 3-year period. So the 25% discount that's coming in. What we were not successful in was to try and smooth that increase for those people that have less than a 30% increase, to not get the 25%, but to apply it to those people, because they would not have an increase at all, to apply it to those people that had the massive increases. That was a step too far. The municipality systems could not accommodate that. So what they've come up with is a blanket 25% increase, a rebate on the increases. So if you, like Brian taught me to do sums, 100 plus 30% minus 25% gets you back to 100 again. So if it was over around about 30 or 32, 33%, if your increase was more than that, your 25% will come off that first. What has now happened is that there are many people that are paying less rates and taxes because the increases were less than the 30, 32 or 33%, and they're getting the 25%, which to me is a bit of an anomaly, but nevertheless, that's how the systems are going to work and how they've been implemented. We couldn't get them to smooth it over a period. What we do know is that the rates and taxes overall increase in the current budget is over 9%. So it means that a good chunk of that would be new development, so about 3 or 4%, which means that the average increase at the moment that seems being planned is around about 5%. We would have liked to see that at 2 or 3%, but 5% is not a train smash. I do have to highlight, however, in our negotiations with the municipality, they did allude to the fact that they themselves were not happy with some of the revaluations because they thought they were too low. So they have referred themselves 2,000 properties to be revalued to the external agency. So although there's been objections from the community saying that our properties are too high, reconsider that, the municipality themselves have decided that some of the properties are still too low and they must be revalued. So it'll take some time before this whole thing gets sorted out and settled. In the meantime, as you know, our rates and taxes get divided into 11 months. The month of July is used to update the systems at the municipality. So August is the first month that you're now going to see the actual impact for your rates and taxes on your bills. And as I say, many will be decreasing and others increasing. So those are the two challenges. The one is if you haven't had feedback on your objection, declare a dispute. And if you are in a situation where you hit for 4, 5, 6 years arrear taxes because of maladministration, then there's a different legal process that you can follow. Then came an analysis of the annual report. The annual report for the year 2019-2020 was a critical delay because of COVID. It should have been done in October, November last year. It eventually, Brian, what was it, March this year, April this year, somewhere there. We were talking to the Auditor General, Brian was talking to the Auditor General a lot at the time, was eventually finalized, and that 526-page report was made available. Highlights from that report is, and this is where we've started to picking up a specific trend with the aid of Brian, is that our municipality increases their budget every year, and they increase the amount that they're going to spend operationally. And during the year, they track their performance. And until May, they don't release their provisions or their over collections or unders into the accounts. They only do that in the very last month. So if you look at their provisional accounting up to the end of May, for example, then it looks as if they're only going to make a 15 million surplus. And then suddenly in the month of, and it's during that time that you approve a new budget, by the way. And then in June, suddenly they release a lot. So what happened in that year, the previous year, is that they made a surplus, additional surplus of 95 million. You go back in the records, and this happens every year before. So the surpluses in our municipalities been increasing steadily over the last 3 or 4 years until the last audited report, which is now the end of June, to sitting at around about 450, no, 700 million, around about 700 million. And those surpluses, by the way, is cash surplus. Our municipality is sitting with a surplus of 2.6 billion, but that is on the balance sheet. And there is assets obviously countering those surpluses, so that nets off. Our interest is in the cash surplus. So the cash surplus as of June 2020, last year, sat at around about 650 million. We then calculated, and Brian calculated, that we anticipate another 100 million coming in this year that ended at the end of June. At the last council meeting that Brian attended, the early figures are looking like 300 million as a surplus that is being made. These surpluses are made due to underspending, over budgeting and underspending, because the various departments, if you take engineering, if you take electricity or whatever, they put in budgets of saying 150 million or 200 million they're going to spend. On average, they don't spend more than 75% of their budget. Now, if you were in a business and a division comes to you and says, I want to put in a budget for 100 million, but in the previous year and the year before, you've only spent 75% of the budget that you've done, then I would have said, sorry, guys, if you're asking for that, you're only getting 75% because you've never spent more than 75% before. However, they allocate the full budget, and then they put the budget together to be able to get that money, and then they underspend. So if our figures are correct, and if we look at what the situation is going to be at the end of June 2021, we believe that that cash surplus is going to go to around 800, 900 million. Unacceptable, 400 million of that is required to be a going concern. And our municipality is winning the awards for the best financially managed and most sustainable municipality in KZN, which is a good thing. And our money is well banked and our money is well collected and so on. We feel as DOCRRA is that they're overdoing it. They're over collecting, or they must start spending their budgets, which they plan to spend so that we can get the services. So our current concern is that surpluses are creeping up. We are paying more and we are not getting the services. And that is our current challenge with the municipality. And that's been a trend that has been going on for a while. Okay. We then got involved with the Auditor General, Brian and his committee, to find out their concerns. The Auditor General is concerned because 2 years ago, he had 47 findings, which the municipality and their management agreed that they will resolve. And they agreed how they would resolve it. Comes the end of the next financial year, which is a COVID year, they come up and they have resolved 6 of the 47. 16 are busy being considered, and the balance haven't even been started yet. Now, fortunately, the Auditor General is now getting some more executive powers, and by the next year, if they still haven't done those, then there is a disciplinary process or another legal process that can be followed. So you're now getting the Auditor General starting to get sticky about his findings being ignored. And sadly, that is the situation. Just to make this all the more interesting, there is a good valuation of what the performance or the productivity of the municipality is. And in the COVID year that ended in June last year, 2020, their productivity, in other words, their achievement, what they said they would do, here's the money I need, this is what I'm going to do. They spent 90% of the money and they achieved 47% of what they said they would do. So in my book, that is a productivity of about 51 or 53%. So every 1,000 Rand that we're paying for the municipality, we're getting 500 Rands worth of value. That is the bottom line, because that's the productivity. And that was for a year that only had 3 COVID months. So we can't wait to see what the performance is going to be at the end of this financial year. And hopefully this audit will be earlier, around about October, November again. So we're keeping our eye on that. We're keeping involved with that, and we're raising alarms around that. Number one, surpluses are being built up. And number two, the performance has decreased on that year from 64% to 47%. We are lucky that one of the things that did increase was service delivery. And that's because of our frequent interaction and kicking and our councillors that are here begging, screaming about roads and electricity. It increased by 11% from 37% to 48%. So it is shocking, but it did increase, but it's still shocking. That's the only department which increased during the last year. Then on MPAC is where you consolidate all the audit opinions. So there's an independent external audit committee. There's the Auditor General, and we listen to their concerns. And their concerns are largely 2 things: lack of performance management and lack of consequence management. And that's our concern. Those are the silver bullets. Well, there's one more, I think, lack of leadership. So lack of leadership, lack of performance management. No department is effectively managed on performance. And if they are found wanting, there is no consequence management. And this is where the Auditor General and this is where DOCRRA is getting involved. Those are the things that we need resolving. Financially, our municipality is fairly well managed. As I said, maybe too well managed. On the planning side, they use lots of consultants and input. So the planning side is correct. So if you had to look at a Poikiko spot on 3 legs, 2 of those legs are standing nice and strong, but the 3rd leg is sitting at about 50% and all the sauce is falling into the fire. And that is the leg, the service delivery leg, that we are working on as DOCRRA to see how we can strengthen that. MPAC has got its report. It's got its 40-odd questions that Brian and Rob McIntosh put together. I think it stumped them. They had to have 4 meetings before they could finalize it, finalize their report, and that has gone to council. I don't know if there's been any decision at council, but it's largely around performance management and consequence management. KDM budget process will start soon. We got involved with that budget process. We attended all the presentations. We made our submissions. They did call us to ask our opinion on the day before the budget was approved at the council. And they said, you've made some submissions. Can we hear what you've got to say? I made a point, and I made a recording of that, saying to the mayor and to the chief financial officer and everybody else, there were 15 people on the meeting, that this meeting is purely a show and tell. It is not a participative meeting because you have already got it on your agenda. You've already finalized the budget and there's no opportunity to change it. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second. What's going to happen going forward is obviously we're going to get the final report for the previous financial year. We'll pull that apart again, and frightened to see 300 million surplus, and we'll have to look at what the productivity is there. You've heard about Caesar Water, so we've got a new dedicated committee looking into that and seeing, what we could assist with that. We've got great interaction now, thanks to Brian, with the Auditor General, with Martin Coates, who's responsible Auditor General for this area, and working very closely with what he can tell us and what he may tell us, but advice and assistance. So we're starting to go outside of the municipality to start at look at structures and organizations that have got the clout to assist us to highlight what we believe the concerns are. We've consistently written to the province and to the MEC responsible at COCTA. We still haven't had a reply from them. So going another provincial level up has not helped us. So we're now going outside to external organizations. Another one of them is OUTA, the organization undoing tax abuse, Wayne Duvenage and his crowd. And we have been working very closely with them on local government organizations. And there's some exciting developments coming from OUTA where they are going to assist organizations such as ours, and DOCRRA is playing a key role in helping develop that, where we could share best practice. What did Mossel Bay do that worked with their municipality that we could learn from? How did eThekwini get a bylaw that is so efficient for managing beaches and why can we not copy that and use that? So those are the kinds of sharing of information that AUTA is going to assist us with. We're also looking at a central communication system on an app for a community such as ours. And I think that that kind of app would have, had it been settled and implemented, would have helped tremendously during the insurrection or the recent unrest that we have. Now, lastly, when you have a new election, municipal election, the new council has to develop an integrated development plan for the area for the next 5 years. That's a very critical plan, because out of that plan, they develop the budget for every year, and they manage and calculate the performance of that year against that budget, against the integrated development plan. The draft integrated development plan has been circulated. Brian and I have gone through it. Brian has highlighted a number of questions and concerns. We've submitted that to the municipality. The important thing is they admit that they don't just engage, they have to participate with stakeholders. And we, DOCRRA, have applied to be on the Integrated Development Plan Forum as the Ratepayers Association for this area. Once you're on the inside and you're sitting on that forum, we'll be able to get a lot more information and hopefully with our councillors exert a lot more influence. So we're hoping to hear about the appointment or us getting a seat on that. I'm going to wrap up before we get under general so we can ask any questions, because I did set a target of 8 o'clock and we're getting there closely. I think the recent insurrection has highlighted, certainly for me, and I think for our committee, how blessed we are on the Dolphin Coast and the Greater Ballito area for the number of volunteer organizations that we have. Neighborhood watches, CPFs, UIPs, business associations, a Ratepayers Association, because all of these managed to get together, and as you heard Warwick say, all of them work together to help form the overall and made their resources available and their communication channels available. Subsequent to that, DOCRRA has got very involved with the outreach initiative, and we trebled our production of soup to the outlying areas, and we started traveling into those areas. And we discovered how many NGOs there are in our area. So not only do we have a very active citizenship as far as community organizations are concerned, we also have a very active donor or charity or outreach or paying forward initiative. And everybody has their niche. My concern is, and I'm delighted to hear what Warwick said, is that we should stop turf wars between the different organizations. And we should learn which one does what in which area, respect one another for our strengths, and work together so that we don't duplicate effort. Because if the municipality is smart, they will seek to divide those kind of organizations and seek to cause disharmony between different initiatives. Now, there are many initiatives going on. Each of us have got our own area of expertise. There's a very strong safety and security one, which has come to the fore with lots of leaderships. There's the business community. There are formal and informal communities. The DOCRRA role is the municipality, is involving and analyzing 400-500-page reports, making comments, getting onto committees, reporting back to impact, and making sure that our budgets in the future are done properly or that we get the service delivery. We work closely with our councillors, and our relationship with the councillors have improved dramatically. So thank you, ladies, that you are here, and to Tommy as well, because I think that that has helped us, and your role in GBOC was also fantastic. So my plea and my quest is going to be, how do we harness the uniquenesses of all these different organizations to work with one another and not undermine one another? Because sadly, there is a bit of that. And I think we need to overcome that, seeing that we've got such great organizations and everybody's got their different role. My last one is KDM. The same way that SAPS arrived blasé 5 days late and told GBOC what they wanted, or KDM arrived 5 days late and hard-handed told them what they wanted, and that we had to claim. The same they are doing with the DOCRRA, where we're putting in recommendations and proposals and emails. It's that same hard-handed approach. And I've thought long and hard about it. And to me, the reason is that in the past, the apathy was so great that they got away with it. So KDM would put out an ad, here's the budget, there's a copy at the municipality. You go to the municipality if you were interested. You're not allowed to take it out from there. You had to photocopy it there, the pages that you wanted to comment on. So what happened? Nobody commented on it. And they got used to ticking the box. We have communicated with the stakeholder. We've not had any feedback, so it means everybody's very happy. Thank you very much. Now, 2-3 years down the line, you're getting a DOCRRA or a other community organization starting to give you input, starting to understand. The comment that Brian and I got with Adil at that first presentation, he's the number 2 guy in the finance department. He was astounded at the questions we asked. He says he's delighted. He didn't think anybody read the budget. And he was very pleased to hear that people are reading it and giving feedback. They are not used to participation. They are used to show and tell, arrive. This is how it's going to be. Clean the road, get away. What are you doing here? And so on. And they're doing the same with us. And if we have to go to court to make them understand the difference between the word engage, show and tell, come to a meeting, ask a question, and here's the answer, and the word participate. There's a difference in those 2 words in the Oxford Dictionary that's this wide, and the law says, the Municipal Systems Act, Municipal Finance Act, and the Constitution says you have to participate. And participate means we sit around the table, we start early, we work on the budget, we explain to you our concerns about surpluses and so on. So that is where we're currently standing, and that's how I see those 2 issues is how do we get all organizations to work together, and how do we get our municipality to understand we're not going away. We are here to participate, and you are going to give us our due right as it is in law to sit down and participate. Ladies and gents, open for questions, comments, and input. Yes, sir.
I live in Brackenwood. You mentioned roads and traffic study is going to standard.
Yes.
Now, does that mean our problematic T-junction will stay for the next 5 years for it to be extended by help or by a robot or by that's your points in? And the second question is, does anybody know what is happening on that corner? Has been here a number of times, and now I see some orange markers here along the circumference. Does the committee know what is going on?
Thank you very much, sir. The question was, just for the Zoom guys, is a gentleman, your name? Peter Zeta asked, Dieter, asked from Brettonwood, asked about the T-junction and how long and when do we hope that that's going to be resolved and what's happening on that corner stand. That T-junction is a problem, and we've tried to talk to many people now, just by way of interest, and Privy helped me where I go wrong. The Sunroll runs the highway into, and they are responsible for anything 200 meters or more on the side of that. That specific road, the Salt Rock Road, is a provincial road. The side road is a municipal road. So you need to get all 3 parties together to agree what has to happen. The same is happening at Dunkirk, at that entrance there. There's 2 million rand lying in a reserve account by the previous developer, waiting for government to decide between province and municipal whether that should be a traffic light or a traffic circle. And the money is lying in the bank to do it. But there are 2 different opinions on what has to happen. That T-junction is a problem insofar as that it becomes the M4. So as you know, across the T-junction, it's going to go via Mount Richmore, via on the side of the N2, below Zimbiti, and it eventually links up behind the junction to the Ashton Road. And until they've finalized what that is, they're not going to make any changes on the T-junction. That will eventually become an M4. The good news is that the development of this whole M4 initiative is going to start on the Flag Farm side. because there are less servitudes and less problems there to resolve. So they're going to start fixing up that M4 from the flag farm side, and that far bridge is going to become an on and off ramp on the highway. And then it'll come to the T junction. It will be a dual double carriage like past Zimbali, and the big traffic circles like Zimbali. In 5 or 6 years from now, I think we'll start seeing something like that, the beginning of it. What's happening on that corner stand? Don't quite know. I also see it's being cleared. A lot of people have shown interest before. We've heard about a shopping center. I don't know if there's a need for another one, but you know, the guys will. What I do know, it's a very complex stand, and it's got a lot of servitudes, and it's got a lot of limitations on access and egress and those kind of challenges. So whomever is going to tackle that piece of land to develop it, yeah, must have big bank accounts and so on. But we will try and find out. I don't know. Ken.
In point of fact, it's actually owned by Micah, and they are looking at establishing a builder supply unit there. Whether they're going to own it for much longer, I don't know, but you're quite right. It overlaps with the church property. And in point of fact, that whole road is actually on church property, which stretches down Salt Rock Road. So there's a whole lot of property, and those markers, those tapes that are there, I got put up so that the church knew where they start and end.
Okay.
But in fact, that whole area is a road reserve, it's quite right to point out, Chair. And there's going to be a 2-lane each way highway going past the front of Breckenwood and of course past the front of All Souls. So intersections, connections, off ramps, on ramps, and all the rest of it still have to be designed. But in the short term, I agree with you. There has to be a resolution to that T-junction intersection. You can't wait for the next 10 years for the M4 to be complete. It'll take 10 years, I can guarantee now.
Yeah, it'll probably. So the answer, just for those people on Zoom, is that piece of land across All Souls at the T-junction corner at Brettonwood is actually owned by Micah. And it's a complex piece of land, and we don't know if they're going to be developing a builders initiative there or not. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to develop there. Just to say to you that we are working on trying to solve that, even if it's a speed bump at the circle, at the turn coming from Salt Rock and at the turn coming from Tiffany's, just to slow that traffic for a second or two to allow movement of other vehicles. But speed bumps in itself has got quite a challenge. But traffic light or a circle, we're not going to get until that redevelops. So we're hoping that a speed bump is something. Any other questions?
Just one other question.
Yes, Trevor.
It's the people of the last 5 years to 10 years have sort of forgotten about yellow lights, and most of the people don't get
Amber.
And it's cops, the council, the traffic cops, and don't ever stop anybody going through a red light. And I think, especially, they should alleviate certain things like having glide-offs more often instead of a red light, where there's no traffic, there's an amber on that. But there's no looking after, and there's going to be some big accidents, because even this Belito opposite the health, the gym, the Virgin Active, people go through that one over amber and farther break.
You're totally right. And my other concern is traffic circles, how they, how people don't yield when there is a yield sign coming into the traffic circle. If you're coming on the main road, you just carry on and you don't yield at all, for anybody else. We'll raise it. I can't answer you. We sadly, it'll take a death or 3. And when that happens, then suddenly all the attention will be focused. But, avoiding that is where the problem sits. So until there has been an accident, and not 1, 2, or 3, then suddenly the attention gets to that kind of intersection and gets resolved. But we'll certainly raise it when we have a meeting with the civil engineering department again. Thank you. Any other questions? Ladies and gents, it's a late time. Yes, sir. Go.
Truly.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you. And with that, I declare our AGM closed, and we'll be in touch with all our other communication during the year. Thank you so much. Thanks for attending.